All right, we are live, folks. Breaking news, breaking news. Protests erupt nationwide. Iranian regime might be toppling very, very soon. We're going to talk about what is going on with Iran and the Iranian regime. The Ayatollah is on the ropes, folks, on the ropes. The Ayatollah is on the ropes. It's quite possible that this regime might be toppled within the next 24 to 48 hours. Literally, protests are erupting worldwide. We are in Paris right now, live, a massive protest. So we're just going to talk about what's going on in Iran. I'm going to show some clips, and we're going to try to find out what is happening here in real time with the Iranian regime. It's kind of crazy out there, and possibly U.S. military strikes on Iran to topple them once and for all. A lot of things are coming out. We're going to see what's going on and, see this issue here that I'm not necessarily totally educated about. So I want to make that perfectly clear that I'm not an Iranian expert whatsoever, but it looks like they're trying to bring back Pahlavi after the Iranian regime toppled them in the late 70s, and to bring them back and to get rid of the Ayatollah and the regime once and for all. It looks like cities are being toppled, protests nationwide, in the country itself. Not only that, but worldwide, they've been doing a bunch of protests. United States, Trump has spoken on this matter. Lindsey Graham has spoken on this matter. They've tried to do it before, I guess, the Green Revolution, but here it might be happening. So Israeli military said they're monitoring the situation. It's tense. It's literally tense. Things are happening. Now, this has been snowballing probably in the last 72 hours, basically all the last 2 weeks, I would say. But the last 72 hours, it's really been kicking up a notch that I've been seeing online. Again, I don't know fully what's going on here. I'm just observing and seeing, and I'm trying to understand. Hopefully y'all can understand with me, and we can try to get a take on the situation. They are in the streets of Paris right now, and there's also a massive protest right now in London. I'm going to put the volume up a little bit so we can hear in on exactly what this is about. All right, so can we get some translators here? Can we get some translators to understand what's going on here? I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen here soon. I think, let me just get up the tweets that Trump has said, President of the United States in the White House with Iran. But I feel like it's coming. It's coming, folks. It is coming. And a lot of news reports are basically saying things like this. Here, I'll put this up on the screen. Trump weighs preliminary plans for action on Iran as protests face violent crackdown. The president has presented with preliminary plans, official says, ranging from possible strikes to other options that would entail military action. So the military talk, the United States military is out there. They did some things on Syria. Just wondering if they're going to circle around and do some strikes on Iran while they're out there. It will be interesting, to say the least. Here we are in Paris. This is Paris, France, and they have taken the streets. I'll also show you what's going on. Actually, yesterday they also did a protest in the White House, outside of the White House. So trying to get educated here to try to find out what's happening. I think Fox News has been reporting this pretty good on the situation. Yes, France. They're I guess other countries are ramping up the pressure too. But why Paris, France? I don't know. Death toll continues to rise. It appears that the military of the Iranian regime is shooting protesters. That's going on here. Death toll rises after days of protests in Iran is significant. State affiliated media says the death toll from days of protests in Iran have been significant. Protesters continue to pour onto the streets across Iran's country, rallying against the regime and a sharp decline in living conditions. Over the past 2 days, Iranians have answered the call of the exiled son of the country's last Shah or king, staging widespread demonstrations, even as the government launches a brutal crackdown. The exact death toll remains unclear after days of protest amid a near total communication blackout. Though even state-affiliated outlets tied to the security apparatus, such as the Taziam news agency, acknowledged a high number of fatalities. U.S.-based human rights activist news agency reports that 116 people have been killed since the protest erupted across all of Iran 2 weeks ago. It remains unclear the full tally and the scale of casualties given the authorities' nationwide shutdown of internet access and telephone lines. So telephone lines and internet access has been cut. You know, I was trying to look for live feeds. I was trying to look for some live feeds in Tehran or anywhere in Iran so we could find out what's going on. But we're like in a blackout. There's a lot of clips. I see a lot of clips, but I don't see anything like, significant here. So we can see what's going on. But Fox News just came out with a report a couple hours ago about Trump administration is eyeing possibly taking military action in Iran. So I'll put that up here and we can listen in and then we'll go back here. We'll put this clip up here. But they have taken the streets in Paris on Iran. And they also took the streets yesterday in Washington, D.C. over Iran. But I want to get this up here and show you this latest news report because there could be military strikes similar to maybe Venezuela or what they did with Maduro just to take out the Iranian regime or the Ayatollah. But the Ayatollah was also given safe. Also, the Russia, it appears, as said that the Ayatollah and his family could go to Moscow. Let's listen into what this report says.
Military launching airstrikes against ISIS in Syria, the second time the U.S. has attacked the Islamic State as part of retaliation for the killings of 2 Iowa National Guardsmen and an American interpreter last month. Our next guest knows all about fighting in the war on terror. Retired Vice Admiral and Navy SEAL Robert Harward led invasions in Afghanistan and Iraq and is a member of JINS's Iran Policy Project. Joining us now, Vice Admiral, thank you for taking time. I want to get your reaction to these strikes in Syria.
Now, I think he's going to talk Syria
first. Just a continuation of the global war on terrorism. ISIS, Al-Qaeda, or these organizations that have American blood on their hands, we're going to hold them accountable and get them. So this is exactly that again. We knew these guys had killed our people. We got them. And that's going to go on. That's going to be a persistent, consistent policy. I think more importantly, though, is the timing and where this happened. This is a clear signal to the government of Syria and others who are interested that we're going to be involved, we support, and we're going to take action to ensure a stable, secure government in Syria. And then I think most importantly that I'm sure is being seen by the people of Iran, this is a signal to the regime in Iran. And as the president has made clear, we are going to hold them accountable. If they're going to continue to oppress, kill, murder their people to maintain power, we stand in support of the Iranian people for regime change. And we're going to hold them accountable for the actions they take. So I think this is a clear signal across all 3 of those spectrums, a real indicator of where this administration is going.
That's exactly right, Admiral. In fact, the Wall Street Journal reporting on possible military options that the Trump administration is looking at. Inside the article, they say this: administration officials have had preliminary discussions about how to carry out an attack on Iran if needed to follow through on the threats, U.S. officials said. The discussions include what sites might be targeted. One option being discussed is a large-scale aerial strike on multiple Iranian military targets. This comes, Admiral, after President Trump took to his Truth Social yesterday saying this: Iran is looking at freedom, perhaps like never before. The USA stands ready to help. What do you foresee possibly developing here?
Oh, it's inevitable. It will happen. There's regime change going to happen in Iran. This president does what he says. He's made that very clear in Venezuela and other places. So it's going to happen. We stand behind the people of Iran. And don't forget, this is what Iran was in the 70s, a prosperous nation that enjoyed all the values and support of the West. So I believe this is, 4 or 5 decades in the coming. It will happen. And what's different here? You have the Bazaris, the business folks. They can't live. This government in Iran has just squandered the opportunity, and this president is stepping up to the plate to ensure it returns to that same place it was decades ago.
And that sure is what precipitated this, the 42% inflation in Iran with the currency that is devaluing by the day. Last 20 seconds I've got. Do you think that the U.S. should maybe let Israel take any lead on strikes before we directly do it, or will it be a U.S.-led operation in your estimation?
I think we should all be synchronized and leveraging the capacity of not only our intelligence, but also our strike capabilities of all our allies in the region, being Israel and others. So I think it's inevitable. We're giving them an opportunity to do this transition peacefully and not with a lot of blood on the ground.
It is a big story. We shall be covering it. Vice Admiral Robert Harward, thank you.
Interesting, folks. Interesting. He's saying the regime collapse is inevitable. Now, let me share here. I'll go back live in Paris right now. They have taken the streets here in Paris. We'll turn it down and we'll talk some. Is Israel going to strike? Is Israel going to strike Iran? This is live. I can't imagine what's going on in Iran right now in all the cities. This is Paris. This is live in Paris. So we're talking about the Iranian regime collapse. It's happening, folks. It's happening in real time. It's literally happening. And I think in the next 24 to 72 hours, the regime is going to be gone.
Il faut que je serve mon truc là, un peu plus tard. Non, non. Non, j'ai pas la clé là. Si ça fait, ça descend.
Oui, après ça marche avec
ouais.
une pièce.
C'est ça. Non, pas une pièce.
Ouais, je sais,
Les boucles à l'aide, ouais. Oui.
King Reza Pahlavi, King Reza Pahlavi, King Reza Pahlavi, King Reza Pahlavi, Javid Shah, Javid Shah, Javid Shah, Javid Shah, Javid Shah, Javid Shah.
They're reporting that 265 protesters have been killed by the Iranian regime in the last week. 265 protesters. So the regime is trying to shoot and kill protesters. That's the last. That's all they got left. That's all they got left because they've been burning buildings and taking over government buildings in each of the cities, all the way up to the capital. And police in these cities have been putting down their guns and siding with the people. So protests are erupting worldwide. And now this is live in Paris, France. Oh, they're burning the Ayatollah. Look, they're burning the Ayatollah. See what I'm saying? Look, see what I mean? They're burning the Ayatollah. Holy smokes. They're burning pictures of the Ayatollah.
Manifestants selon la police qui marchaient à côté d'un qui avait le walkie-talkie.
Ouais, 1200 avant. Allez, à ton avis. À ton avis.
Peut-être plus, mais pas beaucoup.
Ouais.
Approximativement.
Ouais, on peut dire 2000. Facilement. Approximativement 2000. Monsieur militant. Monsieur militant.
So they're all holding pictures of Pahlavi, who is the exiled leader that they want back, or who possibly could be the new leader of Iran once the Ayatollah is gone. That's the pictures that they're holding up. They support this Pahlavi, who is the exiled crown prince, positioning himself as a key figure in Iran's future. So that's the photos that they are holding up, and they want him back, or want his family back once the Ayatollah and the regime is gone.
Je veux
rentrer.
Ben oui. Mais moi aussi.
Je dois envoyer les photos.
En fait, c'est à cause d'un tour de fête.
Sinon, il est déjà parti.
Sinon, c'est parti.
Moi, j'ai pas de rédaction. Je vais tout voir.
Ah, tu vois, c'est dans cette idée-là. C'est ça que j'essaie. T'as pas de ma vie? Ben oui.
Ça va aller si tu fais jusqu'à l'arrivée à Naturel.
Ben oui, c'est pour cela. C'est pour cela, oui. Ah, tu veux prendre un... D'accord. Ok.
Tu veux que je
Oui,
reste avec toi?
non, non, tu peux monter. C'est ça. C'est très plus intéressant de que tu montes maintenant. Et puis,
Bah ouais, parce que là, ça tarde. Donc, on est tellement proches et on est tellement loin. Je vais me mettre là-bas. Franchement, je vais être sur la tête. D'accord?
Ok.
Allez, courage.
Allez. Comment vas-tu, mon enfant?
Ouais, ça va.
Il va falloir qu'on te trouve ton coiffeur.
Mais écoute,
Il
moi,
est
j'ai pas de...
il est parti au bled?
Non. Mais là, je fais une économie. Parce que, j'ai pas chez coiffeur. Et deux, les cheveux longs, c'est autre chose. J'ai pas besoin de monnaie. Alors, j'économise de monnaie, j'économise de coiffeur.
Bon, c'est
Je dépense avec le...
So folks are coming into the chat. We are live watching these protests worldwide. We are in Paris right now as the U.S. weighs military options on Iran. The Iranian people here are fighting back against the regime here, and the regime is on the brink of collapse here, literally. Possibly the Ayatollah and his family, the Iranian president, they all could flee to Moscow, Russia at any given time. I've been looking on Flight Radar 24. There has been a lot of flights all around Iran. I'm surprised there's a lot of their airspace is open per se, because there's a lot of flights, but I'm looking to see if anyone like flees or any reports of fleeing, because it's only a matter of time. It's going to happen. It's going to happen here. They cannot reverse this, no matter how many people get killed fighting the regime here by their IRG and their military. It's going to happen. They're going to topple this regime, and I think the United States and Israel are standing by, possibly going to do some strikes once and for all to help the people fight back, because the United States does not want this Iranian regime. They want to bring it back to the Shah, their Shah's family. They want to eliminate the Iranian Revolution. Or will the Iranian regime survive this? Will they survive this? Because some people in the chat are saying, the Iranian regime, they had the Orange Revolution, they had different revolutions before. There are people rebelled before, and the Iranian regime cracked down on them. Will they survive this? But here's the thing about it is the Iranian was getting a lot of business with Venezuela, and then also, Venezuela dictator Maduro's, been gone now, and then also Syria too. And there have been, Iran has proxies all over the place, different terror group proxies all over the place, sleeper cells all over the, world. And United States has been gutting that out in Syria right now, just basically isolating Iran. I think it's a different story now. I don't think they survive this. I don't. I hear them screaming, Shaw, Shaw, Shaw. That's what I kind of hear them say. Again, it's not in English. So, but we can kind of hear the chants and everything like that. This is interesting. See, the Iranian attorney general, the reports are coming out saying the Iranian attorney general says legal action against protesters will be conducted without mercy. Iran's attorney general, Mohammad Azad, said yesterday that legal proceedings against protesters will be carried out without leniency, mercy, or appeasement. He's basically calling them insurrectionists. The charges against all rioters are the same, whether they are individuals who have helped rioters and terrorists in the destruction and the damage of the public security and property, or mercenaries who have taken up arms and caused fear and terror amongst the citizens. So the Iranian regime is basically saying they're going to crack down on these protesters with no mercy, which to me seems like death, right? Death, probably hang them. Anyone that gets arrested or something as being a protester in Iran, they'll probably shoot them on the spot, maybe. Wow. So, the regime is still doubling down here. It's a lot of talk. Also, the Ayatollah is talking about Trump, President of the United States, on his Twitter account. So another thing you notice is the people here are waving the old Iranian flag. The old Iranian flag, which is the Lion and Sun flag. It's the old Iranian flag. The Lion and Sun flag was the official flag of Iran before the 1979 Islamic Revolution. So they're waving the old flags of Iran here. The Lion and Sun flag.
les amis français, nous étions là depuis 4 ans, on est dans les rues à Paris, avec le respect. Et à chaque fois, on a demandé l'autorisation pour faire la manif, le peuple iran, les plus respectueux au monde, ils ont respecté toutes les règles. Et ça, c'est le message à monsieur le préfet. Monsieur le préfet, comme vous m'avez serré la main pendant votre soirée, et vous m'avez bien dit parole, restez sur votre parole, et à chaque fois qu'on vous demande une autorisation de manifester, de force, je l'appelle même pas l'ambassade de l'Iran, devant la maison de terroristes, parce que vous savez, noir sur blanc, vous êtes bien au courant que c'est l'ambassade, ils fabriquent les terroristes pour notre sécurité sur le sol France. Quand on vous demande de fermer cette putain d'ambassade de terroristes, vous ne nous avez même pas accordé de manifester. Et là, à l'instant, c'est quand on a commencé notre marche, vos amis, vos collègues, ils ont arrêté un acteur de cinéma Iran qui est réfugié ici parce qu'il voulait manifester.
So again, people are in the chat. They have taken the streets of Paris. There's also a giant protest in London too. They are protesting the Iranian regime here, and they want the old Shah's family back in Iran. They want the regime gone. So the regime is on the brinks of collapse. It appears.
Je demande à tous les amis avocats qui sont là, présents, d'essayer de nous aider, de sortir le monsieur acteur qu'il s'est fait massacrer il y a un instant pour les manifs, parce qu'il avait envie d'aller manifester devant les maisons de terrorisme. Attention, gouvernement français, comme je répète encore, une fois, restez derrière le peuple iranien. Et attention, faites pas magouille avec les républiques islamiques, parce qu'ils ont l'argent et vous faites des magouilles en dessous de table. C'est inacceptable. La honte, la honte et la honte. Et on va crier tous ensemble. Libérez, Pashtou. Libérez, Pashtou. Tous ensemble, on va crier fort. Solidarité avec l'enfant en Iran. Solidarité avec l'enfant en Iran.
Just saw the Eiffel Tower. See the Eiffel Tower? That's the Eiffel Tower, isn't it? Looks like the Eiffel Tower to me. I'll be honest. I'm also sightseeing Paris. This is like sightseeing. They're taking us through the streets of Paris here while they protest. So we're doing a little sightseeing, looking at architecture, designs, buildings, streets, dog. I hear little dogs yapping. Yep, 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 yep. Oh, and the sirens. We're sightseeing Paris. I was always impressed by law enforcement's their police sirens. Yeah, they're chanting for Pahlavi to come home. People are chanting. They're chanting for Pahlavi to come home. They're chanting for him to come home. Also, folks, I am monitoring to see if anything's popping off in the United States this morning. It's pretty quiet in the United States of America this morning. So I'm also just seeing what's going on, if there's any, disturbances or anything like that. And I don't see anything at this time. So we're gonna talk a little bit about Iran and the Iranian regime on possibly on the brink of collapse. I mean, most of the experts are all saying it's collapsing. It's happening in real time. They're circling the wagons around Tehran. Some people are saying in the chat, has there been any reports about U.S. intervention in Iran? And that is yes. Yes, the talks are the United States could possibly do military strikes somewhere in Iran, like soon. Like I'm literally like soon. Like I wouldn't be shocked if it happens today. I would not be shocked if it happens today, like soon. I do think the United States military, while they're out there, is going to do something here. What are they going to do? I don't know what they're going to do, but could that be a couple of the strikes to embolden the people there to finally, go in there in Tehran and just go in there and remain to be seen. I think it's tonight. People in the chat are saying Ted Cruz said it was tonight. Lindsey Graham spoke too and said it's done for them. It's done. It's over. It's a wrap. It's over. And, considering what we just saw in Venezuela, the United States says they're going to do something, or the talk is that they're going to do something. Members of, senators or members of Congress, they say it's happening, folks. It's just, it's going to happen. What is going to happen? That remains to be seen. And should the U.S. be involved here? Because, you got a President Trump that advocated for, peace through strength, no wars. And yet, they might be striking Iran. They already did it once early last year with their nuclear facility. Some of them, they're doing it again. But here's the thing is, I think the Trump administration is just going after all these regimes, because they pretty much sent a message today that Cuba's next. Cuba's next, more or less. So we got to keep our eyes on Cuba. We got to keep our eyes on Iran. Obviously, whatever is going to happen out in Venezuela. And then there's talks about him invading Greenland. That's a whole other conversation because the talks are like, well, he's going to invade Greenland, but his military people are saying, well, you can't really necessarily do it like that. It's illegal. But, you know, he wants Greenland because he pretty much said, if I don't get Greenland, Russia or China will get Greenland. I want Greenland. But I'm not sure about Colombia, though, because he did say the other day that the Colombian president is going to meet with Trump next month. So he might be playing ball, the Colombian president here. Though I also do think Mexico is a target too. Mexico's target in reference to the cartels. I think a lot is happening at the southern border, and they might be going over the Mexican side and take out the cartels once and for all, or at least start to take them out. Now, you know, one thing I noticed here, look at this. They literally are the old Persian flag, right, with the Israeli flag. I thought that's interesting, too. Look at the flags together there, the Israeli flag and the old Persian flag before the 1979 Iranian Revolution. They're waving these flags together, Israel flags and the Persia flag, right, or the old Iranian flag. Well, they're playing music. We'll keep it down for copyright reasons because they'll kill the stream. But yeah, they're out here strong here in Paris. This is Paris. Yeah, but there's a lot of talk. There's a lot of talk about possibly military strikes. President Trump has been weighing a range of options for military action against Iran amid its crackdown on protesters. You know, Trump is saying that he's going to do it in the name of protecting protesters. Which is interesting because look at the protests going on around the country right now, protesting the Trump administration. It's wild stuff. Trump has said publicly that he may take action if Iranian leaders kill protesters challenging Iran's regime as demonstrations enter their second week. Despite an increasingly aggressive crackdown, no decision has been made. Now, this report just came out this morning at 9:18 a.m. The president has been presented with preliminary plans, the officials say, ranging from possible strikes to other options that would not entail military action. At least 265 people have been killed, 162 protesters and 41 members of the security forces since demonstrations have kicked off 2 weeks ago, according to figures by the U.S.-based human rights activist news agency. So Iran warned Trump on Sunday that Israeli and U.S. military bases in the region could be considered legitimate targets. So the Iranian regime is, talking back, saying that the Israeli and U.S. military bases, which is all around the Middle East, could be targets themselves if the strikes go ahead. Now, what could that be? Does Iran have nukes that we don't know about? Are we talking about nuclear capabilities here? So the Iranian regime is saying, yeah, we'll shoot back, we'll fight. But they've always said that, right? But do you believe that Iranian regime at this point, it's like at the brink of economic collapse? You really think they have the capabilities to strike back, unless their sleeper cells are out there? If the United States launches a military attack, both the occupied territory and U.S. military and maritime centers will be our legitimate targets, the Iranian parliament speaker said in Sunday remarks aired on Iranian state television, referring to Israel as the occupied territory. They call Israel the occupied territory. It's crazy. Within the framework of legitimate defense, we do not limit ourselves to reacting after an attack. Trump earlier this week threatened military intervention if Iran moves to crush the protests. Addressing its leaders on Friday, he said, you better not start shooting because we'll start shooting too. He offered further support for the protesters on Saturday, saying in a post on Truth Social, Iran is looking at freedom, perhaps like never before. The U.S. stands ready to help. And then the State Department also put out a separate post, social media post, and says, do not play games with President Trump. When he says he'll do something, he means it. The Israeli military said Sunday that it is monitoring developments in Iran and will be able to respond with power if need be. The demonstrations, which were sparked by economic grievances 2 weeks ago as the currency crashed and inflation has soared in Iran, having now morphed into one of the biggest challenges the Islamic Republic has ever faced in its 47-year history, as thousands of people have taken the streets to demand the ouster of the ruling clergy. In an address on Iranian state TV today, the Iranian president accused the U.S. and Israel of seeking to sow chaos and disorder in Iran, using people to distance themselves from rioters and terrorists. General Ahmad Radan, the commander-in-chief of Iran's police force, said on Sunday that an enhanced response to the protests was now in place, according to Iran's news agency. He said a number of arrests have taken place. So it appears also at the same time the Iranian regime is claiming that they're going to crack down on these protesters with brute force and considering them insurrectionists, terrorists, and whatnot. Crazy. Yeah, they're still playing music, so I'm going to keep it down till they're done with the music. JLR investigates. We are monitoring the situation and developments. This is a live look in Paris, France, where people are protesting against the regime. I'm sure these people are like refugees or people that are probably originally from Iran. Just like when we have in this country with the stuff that happened in Venezuela, you had, Venezuelan Americans now are originally, Venezuelans originally are now living in South Florida. They were taking the streets of South Florida celebrating once Maduro was taken out. So I'm sure around the world, there might be Americans now in this country that are of Iranian descent that could be celebrating this or could not, or I don't know. And there also could be sleeper cells in the United States too. So keep in mind too, folks, because the last couple of years, according to the federal government, they have, stopped Iranian plots of terror on U.S. soil that they claim. Also, folks, the internet is black. The internet, there's all types of blackouts going on in Iran with the internet and the power. Internet blackouts in Iran continue into Sunday, according to NetBlocks, an internet monitoring group. Amnesty International has called the blackouts an attempt by authorities to hide the true extent of the grave human rights violations and crimes under international law that are carrying out to crush nationwide protests. Security forces sent text messages to people suspected of attending illegal gatherings, Iranian state media said Saturday, warning them that they have been identified as participants using location data and that covering their faces with masks won't help avoid detection. The internet blackout has made it difficult for international media to gauge the extent of the protests, but footage verified by NBC News showed hundreds of anti-government protesters gathered in Tehran, clapping and shouting the name of their country. Another verified video showed hundreds of protesters gathered in Tehran's Panak Square, chanting and playing music and waving their phone flashlights in the air. Other footage shows scores have also gathered in the city's squares, singing and clapping their hands as they march through the streets. It is unclear if the videos were taken on Friday or Saturday night, but they are recent. Iran's Revolutionary Guard aligned media claimed that Saturday was a calm night across the country, with security forces having put the rioters back in their place. So there might be the propaganda machine that is up there in full force. Pahlavi, the exiled son of Iran's late Shah, Mohammed, continued to encourage the protesters on Sunday after either calling for them to prepare to seize the city centers across Iran. He lives in the U.S. and has emerged as a figurehead for some of the protesters, touting Trump's support in a post on X. So there you go. And we're talking about Pahlavi. We're talking about Pahlavi, who is the son of the Iranian, or the Shah. The son of the Shah might be the one that might be the next leader. By the way, I am not an expert on Iran whatsoever. I'm just sharing what's being put out there. I'm learning as I go. Probably y'all are learning. Some of you might know more. If I'm butchering some names, I apologize. We're not Iranian experts in foreign policy whatsoever on the channel. We just show what's going on in real time and read the reports. I think it's coming. My opinion here, I think it's coming. We've seen these over the years where people would protest against the Iranian regime and the regime would fight back and then it would just die down and quell down. This one has been snowballing and escalating. I don't see how the regime can survive this because they really don't have no other support. I mean, their terror cells are being, destroyed worldwide. Their nuclear capability, the United States already went in there and flexed their muscles and took out some of their nuclear capability in airstrikes in the middle of the night before. Their economy is collapsing. Venezuela with the dictator gone, so some of their allies are running and fleeing and getting detained and arrested. I think it's over. I think it's over. And, on the world stage, the United States is like, no more, no more. They want to liberate. But should the United States and Israel get involved? It's another story. That's another conversation. Should it? If you are a, pro-Trump supporter out there, you support America first. Is this America first? If the United States is using military strikes to help Israel or help the people take out the Iranian regime, is that American first? Is that America first? I think CNN is doing some pretty good reporting on this for American media, and they put out a report 10 minutes ago, and they said, never ever seen such a thing. Iran's internet shutdown is unprecedented in its reach, expert says. And it goes on to say the internet blackout in Iran is unprecedented in its reach and has affected every single channel of communication, according to a cybersecurity expert. Amir Rashadi, director of cybersecurity and digital rights at Iran-focused human rights organization, the Man Group, told CNN Sunday he has never seen such a thing. This is not about an internet shutdown anymore. This is shutting down every single channel of communication, mobile phone, fixed phone, text messages. While authorities in Iran have imposed internet shutdowns in the past, the most recent blackout has some key differences, he said. 2019 was the worst internet shutdown we have ever seen, but the local network was working. The domestic network was working. He said, in every other shutdown they have done, the domestic network was working. Text messages were working. Phone calls were working. He said they're not working. Nothing is working now. Meanwhile, Rashadi said the ongoing blackout has shut down Iran's domestic internet network, as well as emails, websites, and other lines of communication. Even media outlets affiliated with the Iranian state and security apparatus appear to have been hit by the shutdown, with significantly fewer frequent updates than usual since the blackout began. Well, case in point, I wanted to come on here and talk about this stuff in Iran days ago, but I couldn't find nothing. I couldn't, I'm not knowing what's going on here, and I'm only going by unverified clips played on Twitter. They say this and that, but some of the stuff is AI enhanced. Some of the stuff, you don't know what's real and what's not. You obviously know something's going on. We don't know the full extent. So it's like a complete blackout there. Nobody knows what's really going on in Iran right now.
Okay. On va écouter les députés, on respecte comme j'ai fait. J'ai bien crié. On est le peuple le plus respectueux parce qu'à chaque fois, chaque fois.
All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put this up here, and I just want to play this report by CNN, just basically summarizing it, an American media perspective. Whether you believe it or not, I'm going to put this up here because it kind of gives them insight about what the situation is. I think this is a good report. It's about 10 minutes, kind of like filling us in on what's going on here so we understand, and also what medias want us to think too. Sometimes people don't like CNN. I'm not necessarily a fan of CNN, though I think they're starting to redeem themselves. But I want to put this up here, and we're going to listen in on this report, and then we'll take it back live in Paris, and we'll see what else. And I'm seeing what's going on in I'm also seeing what's going on in London too. So let's put this to the stage. Let's listen in, and then we'll listen and see what they say.
A near total internet blackout amid widespread anti-government protests. Authorities cut off communication more than 36 hours ago, raising fears of a brutal crackdown to suppress dissent. The demonstrations have raged for nearly 2 weeks in more than 100 cities. You are seeing footage there from the capital, Tehran, where some protesters chanted, "Long live the Shah." They called for an end to the Islamic Republic and the return of the Shah's exiled son. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump issued another stark warning, threatening to hit Iran, quote, "where it hurts," if it uses violence against protesters. Iran's supreme leader has said Trump should focus on, quote, his own country. For more on what's taking place across Iran, I want to bring in our Paula Hancock's in Abu Dhabi. Paula, thanks for joining me again. President Trump is weighing in on the protests with a pretty strong warning to Iran's leaders there. What does that tell us about how the White House is viewing this moment?
Well, Ben, it tells us the White House is watching what's happening in Iran very closely. It's not just the US president, also the Secretary of State, others within the Trump administration who are commenting on this. Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, saying that that they stand with the protesters. And we have heard some fairly strong words from the US president saying that the US would step in if peaceful protesters were killed. Let's listen to what he has said just recently.
I just hope the protesters in Iran are going to be safe, because it's a very dangerous place right now. And again, I tell the Iranian leaders, you better not start shooting, because we'll start shooting too.
Now, we know that there have been dozens of people killed at this point. The figures we have are from the Norway-based Iran Human Rights NGO. They say at least 45 killed, 8 children among that number, and hundreds are injured, they say, along with about 2,000 or more that have been arrested. Now, CNN cannot independently verify these numbers, but this is similar to what we are hearing from a number of rights groups inside the country. It does appear as though the protests have momentum. The fact that they are being held in every single province across Iran at this point. We've heard authorities say that they have sympathy for the economic concerns, which is what sparked these protests almost 2 weeks ago now. But they are criticizing what they call rioters and foreign mercenaries, claiming that they are causing trouble. But what we are seeing on the ground are these increased calls, not just for economic justice, but for better management of the country's economy, but also calling for regime change, calling a chance like death to the dictator, wanting this Islamic regime to collapse. And we're also hearing those calls from outside of the country as well. Reza Pahlavi, for example, he is the eldest son of the late Shah, who was deposed back in 1979 when the Islamic Revolution took place. He is making very direct calls for nationwide action. Let's listen.
I ask all of you, today and tomorrow, Saturday and Sunday, this time starting at 6 p.m., to come into the streets with flags, images, and national symbols, and to reclaim public spaces as your own. Our goal is no longer merely to come out into the streets. The goal is to prepare to seize city centers and hold them.
Now, we have heard among some protests through images that have been posted on social media, chants that are pro-monarchy, but it is very difficult to gauge exactly what support Pahlavi, for example, does have still within Iran, and whether or not this is just a pocket or whether there are more that would want to see a return to the monarchy. Now, we have also been seeing small pockets of pro-regime protests as well, a number of pro-government demonstrations that are being broadcast on Iranian state television, Press TV, for example. But it will be obviously very closely watched by those around the world the coming days and how these protests escalate, especially given there is that internet blockout in the country that started on Thursday night by authorities. There are great concerns that this could mean that a crackdown by authorities on these protesters could become more brutal. Ben.
Okay, thank you so much for your reporting. Paula Hancock's in Abu Dhabi there.
My source tonight is CNN's Fareed Zakaria, host of Fareed Zakaria GPS every Sunday here on CNN. And Fareed, it's great to have you because I want to know what you make of these 13 days of protests. It's obviously impossible to ignore, to see how much it's growing. What is your sense from what we can see and what we do know of what we're seeing play out in Iran tonight?
Caitlin, ever since the Iranian Revolution, there have been many protests, and there have been many very widespread protests. The regime is very good at tamping down these protests, using brutal repression, using forms of patronage. But all that said, I do think this one seems different, and it does feel like the regime is at a turning point. And the reason for that is conditions in Iran are terrible. The military has been devastated. The economy is devastated. And also, you have the reality that President Trump has now issued a kind of warning, which means the regime has to be careful of the kind of crackdowns they do, which they've tended to do in the past with abandon. So you put all that together, and it does feel like either they are going to go down a path of really extraordinary repression. Maybe they do it in a way that isn't as easy to televise, but that will still, that will be something the population will see, or they will have to give in some way. But it doesn't feel like this is going to get diffused very easily.
So how does the president factor into all this? Because, I mean, obviously you saw his threats today. If they start shooting the protesters, the United States is going to start shooting. I saw the Supreme Leader today was telling Trump he should focus on his own country instead. But how do they hear the threats from the president of the United States?
Oh, I think they take them seriously because, the president of the United States is the leader of the most powerful military in the world, and a military that showed Iran that it can extend its reach right into Iran, with its most prized possessions, its nuclear program. And I think that, look, the regime has always used this mixture of patronage and repression. Patronage for rural communities, more religiously minded people. They have had a base of support, not a majority, but some kind of base. And then brutal repression every time there is some kind of protest, every time there is some kind of dissent. And that repression is very substantial. And even if there are liberals within their own ranks, they repress them. Remember the Green Movement. This is a regime that is very skilled at repression, because in a sense, they came to power through revolution, Caitlin. They know they're not going to let another revolution take place on their hands. But this time, it just feels like the economic conditions are bad. The regime is broken militarily. They face the Trump threat. They face an Israeli threat. It's This is looking like a perfect storm that Iran is going to find it very hard to navigate through.
One is we're watching them try to navigate through it. The son of the former Shah, who was overthrown in 1979 during that revolution, he's been thanking the president. He says that he's promising to hold the regime to account. And I know protesters were heard there chanting for his return. I want to know, do you think that's realistic, or, given your extensive experience in this area, how do you view that?
it's difficult to imagine the return of a monarchy, but I think Reza Shah, the man you're talking about, whom I know, is a very decent man who has often said that he would imagine a purely constitutional role. And is it conceivable that he could play some part like that, like the Spanish monarch did when democracy came back to Spain, where he kind of helped facilitate a transition to democracy? It's absolutely possible. I think that the truth is the Iranian people have lived through one of the great totalitarian nightmares of the 20th century, now into the 21st century. And so there's probably a great longing for change. But I do want to emphasize, Caitlin, the regime has power, has money, has guns, and has shown itself unwilling, quite willing to use them. So I don't think they're going to go down without a fight. That's
interesting. I'm going to take it back to the scene here. Don't think they're going to go without a fight. Matter of fact, that feed went down. That was in Paris. Now that was a CNN perspective. I also have a Fox perspective. I have a Fox News perspective. They just put out a report here on the matter too. Let's try to get ourselves informed as much of the information that's being put out there to find out what is going on here in Iran. Now, one thing he left on saying the regime has money and the regime has guns. The regime has money and the regime has guns. I personally think the regime is done. And people in the chat are like, it's done. It's done. It's a whole different dynamics. And as he said, perfect storm here.
Into a big story that we are following at this hour. Take a look, the latest on the protests in Iran that are now nearing 2 weeks. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has signaled a major crackdown is coming, despite serious warnings from President Trump. Iran's Attorney General warning today that anyone taking part in protests will be considered a, quote, enemy of God, which is punishable by death. And the AG adding even those who, quote, helped rioters could be sentenced to death as well. Right now, we know the regime has shut down internet in the country and cut off phone lines for folks living there. President Trump has put the Iranian regime on notice, repeatedly saying that the U.S. could intervene and strike Iran if protesters continue to be killed.
They've started shooting the hell out of people, and all of a sudden people without any weapons whatsoever are standing there and you have machine guns gunning them down, or they take them to prisons and then hang them and kill them. So they played rough, and I said, if they do that, we're going to hit them very hard. Well, we're going to hit them hard. We're ready to do it. If they do that, we're going to hit them hard. And so far, for the most part, there's been some of it, but for the most part, they haven't.
And you were looking at some of the video there. Now, we do have that statement that came in from Iran's Attorney General. This is just a portion of it, but it does say, translated, prosecutors must carefully and without delay, by issuing indictments, prepare the grounds for the trial and decisive confrontation with those who, by betraying the nation and creating insecurity, seek foreign domination over the country. Proceedings must be conducted without leniency, compassion, or indulgence. Now, we did see Secretary of State for the U.S. Marco Rubio post simply this on social media today, quote, the United States supports the brave people of Iran. And the State Department itself posting on X saying, do not play games with President Trump. When he says he'll do something, he means it. Again, a look at some of the video here coming in out of Iran at this hour of those large protests that do continue. The U.S.-based human rights activist news agency reporting that at least 65 people have been killed during the demonstrations, with more than 2,300 others detained. The Supreme Leader stating Trump is at least partially to blame for these protests. There is so much to discuss here, as always, so I do want to bring in Jonathan Salye, a research analyst at the Foundation for Defense of Democracy's Iran program. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today.
It's great to be with you, Josh. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And as I mentioned, this is a story that so many people are paying close attention to, not just in the U.S., not just in Iran, but all over the world here. Can you kind of break down the Supreme Leader's comments there regarding President Trump and his role, he says, there in those protests and demonstrations?
So this has been a tactic for years now by the Islamic Republic, trying to delegitimize these protesters by using these fake accusations that they're operating on behalf of a foreign government. And as you pointed out, these are serious accusations. Under the Islamic Penal Code, any form of espionage or operating on behalf of an adversary, quote unquote, is punishable by death. But that said, this particular wave has been very receptive to this administration's public diplomacy. We've seen what protesters are chanting on the ground, and they've absolutely heard what President Trump had to say, what Secretary Rubio have to say. These acts of solidarity have gone a long way. They've been very inspiring to the Iranian people. So it is really a moment that we need to back this rhetorical really remarks with action.
I also want to ask you, just overall, as we go kind of back to basics here, can you explain just how these protests really began and what the protests are all kind of related to?
Absolutely. So there has been a major really increase in anti-regime sentiment, of course, starting back in 2009 when I was involved in these protests back when I was in Tehran. At that phase, the trigger was mostly political. That of course, got cracked down on. Then we saw wave after wave starting in 2017, 19, 2022, and now this current wave. And although they've had different triggers in the past, for example, they may have been a political trigger like 2009, or environmental triggers because of water scarcity, or a social trigger like we saw in 2022 with the Women Life Freedom Movement, or in this case being an economic trigger, the collapse of the rial. Nonetheless, the grievances are going beyond just demands of whether economic reform or political reform. The demands are inherently regime change by the people. And we're seeing an increase in a nationalist sentiment, a desire to bring back the monarchy led by Pahlavi. So that is really what is generating the momentum with this current protest wave.
And again, you're looking at some of the video coming in out of Iran, and you can see just how many people are involved in these different protests. We've also seen some of the objects there, vehicles and such, that are lit on fire, and you'll see some of that video in just a second. How might the reported fatalities, as we mentioned, at least 65 at this point, potentially affect the people's willingness to continue protesting, especially if the Supreme Leader tells them you might be sentenced to death?
Iranians are no stranger to crackdowns. This has been going on for years now. It is unfortunately part of their daily lives. We have to remember that following the 12-day war, officials arrested more than 20,000 Iranians for simply posting something on Twitter or on social media or on X or Instagram or what have you. So this is a regime that really looks for any excuse to crack down on dissidents, whether it executes them in jails or opens fire on them on the street. This is really a point of no return for them. The idea that them backing down would somehow improve their livelihood is no longer an option. You're talking about a population that's so alienated by its own regime, a population that's inherently anti-Islamist and is really thriving for a secular form of democracy. So they really don't have a reason to stop protesting because daily life in Iran has not really been functional in a normal sense. People can't afford food. They do not see this government as legitimate or as really a representative of Iranian national interests. And given how far protesters have really taken this movement now, we're reaching a point of no return, meaning if they were to stop right now, the backlash afterwards would be really, really horrendous.
What about the potential for U.S. involvement? Is it more of a threat? What is the realistic possibility of the U.S. getting involved in all of this?
There certainly are quite a range of things Washington can do right now. Of course, as we said, public diplomacy, rhetorical support is very, very helpful, but it needs to be backed up with other actions. But it's very important that we know supporting Iranian protesters is not necessarily an act of war, in a sense that there's no expectations of boots on the ground like we saw in other Middle Eastern countries. In this case, Iranian anti-regime movement has the capacity to really topple the regime and really be an advocate for U.S. in the region, be an American ally. So that should be what we're focusing on. And there are two main immediate things Washington can do. One of them is cyber support. So you want to have cyber attacks against the regime's repression apparatus, the command and control, to disrupt that, allowing protesters to really expand their movement. Parallel with that, is important that we maintain and sustain these strikes led by laborers, and that could be done using the frozen assets that Iranians have in different banks. So you have these two pillars, but more importantly, it's really important for Washington to back up these threats. It's important that the Islamic Republic knows if they continue to open fire on unarmed protesters, there will be consequences. And there's a framework for that. We saw what Israel did during the 12-day war, specifically during the last few days. They went after the repression apparatus, going after the Basij, local headquarters, enabling all these protest movements to really unify.
Is there anything about these protests and really the situation in general there in Iran that maybe people don't fully understand, misunderstand? What can you tell me about that?
There are main three themes that I've noticed that have not really been covered accurately, I think, so far. One of them is the label of economic protest. These protests, even though, as we said, were ignited by an economic development, they're not inherently economic, meaning there's no demands for economic reform. The demands are inherently regime change. And second of that, this is perhaps the only anti-Islamist civic movements in the Middle East. That is very important for Europe and America to realize. You're talking about a region that's really troubled with Islamism, and Iranians so far have been the only really voice against political Islam in the region compared to any other country, perhaps right next to Israelis. And third, which is perhaps the most important, is when we talk about Iranian movements in the past, oftentimes they were leaderless. They were maybe more spread out. But this wave particularly is not leaderless like it was in the past. The opposition here, led by Crown Prince Pahlavi, was able to bring people to the street, has great influence over these protests. And it's very important that really the West, Europe, and Washington starts engaging the Iranian opposition, given that they're the only viable option we have. And of course, they have great influence over these protest movements.
What do we watch for here in the coming days? Again, we are nearing the 2-week mark here. What do we need to watch for in the coming days, weeks, months?
Well, there are two factors, one external and one internal, that would really be pivotal. Externally speaking, if we see any help going beyond just verbal support coming from Washington or Israel, which is likely given the history that these two countries have had with the Islamic Republic. So that would be a real game changer, specifically because no major movement, no major revolutionary movement happens in isolation. Everything's always connected. External factors always play a role in any real revolutionary movement we've seen throughout history. Domestically speaking, I think the key term here is defections. We would want to see what entities start defecting first. So Iran's repression apparatus is quite extensive. You have the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is designated by Washington as a terrorist organization, and you have other entities operating under it, like the Basij, and then you have local law enforcement. And the first phase of that would probably look like acts of disobeying orders for these forces to refrain from shooting protesters or refraining from showing up to their post, and that could later trickle down into defections. And the Crown Prince does have a plan in mind for this defection really strategy. So those two key factors would be major changes and would be a total game changer for this current movement.
Jonathan, thank you so much, as always, for being here with us. This is obviously going to continue, so I'm sure we'll have you back soon. Anything else we missed? Anything you want to make sure to mention here before I let you go?
I think we covered the main themes, but the main issue here is that time is of essence. And if this movement fails to really bring major change, that would be a huge devastating blow to the anti-regime morale. So it is now or never. The time is sensitive. It is in America's strategic interest to support these protesters in the long run. So let's hope for a better future for the region, for the Middle East, and for U.S. policy towards Iran.
All right, so they bring that's the Fox perspective on the situation. The feed went away on what's going on, but I just want to. I'm going to put this up and keep it silent here, and then we'll talk and we'll wrap up here because I don't think we have anything else we can share here on what's going on with this because there is something going on with the UK, but same kind of thing that what we saw in Paris. We'll add this up here. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit. I'll move myself over to the right. Now, while we were playing some of these clips from some of the mainstream media about the situation, hopefully it kept you informed about what's going on and give you more insight, because I'm learning as I go too. So again, I think this is all, but it appears as this is the protesters or the anti-regime's only chance here. It's now or never. You got to do it now, because if you fail on this, the Iranian regime will probably crack down and kill all of them. But what has just been reported is the death toll in Iran has risen to at least 420 people. So I saw that while the clips were going on. Death toll has now reached 400 people, 420 people. That's how many have died during the demonstrations over the last 15 days, including multiple children. That's what's being reported. Now, whether that's a lie or not, because, I think there's also a lot of factors coming into play here of people with agendas and propaganda, and, the information that's being put out there, whether, it's true or not. But that's the new information. That also could be information they want to put out there to try to inspire more people to come out and, take on the regime and or get the United States involved with, or Israel involved with intervention in Iran, United States intervention. So it's pretty wild here. What's on here? The Mirror has some sort of protest hitting the streets. So people have been taking the streets. These are some of the footage here. I think this channel here has compiled a bunch of clips about, people resisting and whatnot and the damage being done. But this is something we're definitely going to pay attention to and, keep an eye out on Iran and see where this goes. I think that it's possible the U.S. strikes them soon with some sort of strikes. Just an opinion. Let me know yours with this topic, and fill us in if you know more, or you want to share, or you recommend people to follow in reference to this, good channels to follow, because I see so many channels. I'm looking on YouTube, so many channels, but it's like, I don't know, it's like loops and it's weird stuff, and Iran has some channels centered around Iran International in Arabic channels, but they're not really English channels. So you want to get an English perspective, for us in the America, but we have viewers all around the world and we appreciate everyone. But, for us here, we are an English channel. I want to hear kind of like an American perspective of what is going on, at least of what they want us to think is going on, or what they're putting out there on what's going on with Iran. And then, they mix in different things from what the government has put out, the Trump administration, their take on the situation and whatnot. Let me look one more look here. Well, actually, the BBC, you might as well just stay on and keep everyone informed. Like the BBC just put out a review. And, BBC is interesting because, they're out of Britain, but, they do a lot of international news and whatnot. So let me get this BBC up in here, and then we might as well just watch it, keep it on. I'm just monitoring what else is going on out there. We'll listen to the BBC News and see what they have to say about the situation. So stand by. I'll put this up in the pipeline here, and then we all can keep getting informed. This would be more of an international news perspective of the situation with Iran right here. So here we go, folks. We'll listen in. BBC News.
With the latest from Iran, because in the last hour, the country's parliament speaker has warned that any attack by the United States over the country's ongoing protests would lead to Tehran striking back against Israel and regional US bases as what he called legitimate targets. These are some of the pictures that state TV showed as Parliament debated what to do. Now, US media is reporting that President Trump has been briefed on new options for military strikes against Iran in response to the killing of protesters. Now, inside Iran, hundreds of people have been reportedly killed or wounded by Iran's security forces over the past 3 days, as details of the violence against protesters emerge despite an internet blackout. The unrest is causing major issues for Iran's medical system. Staff at 3 hospitals have told the BBC their facilities are overwhelmed with dead or injured patients. BBC Persian says it's verified some 70 bodies were brought to just one hospital on Friday. The protests began in late December, sparked by Iran's worsening economic situation. They've now spread across the country. Our first report this hour is from our world news correspondent, Joe Inwood.
Are we seeing unrest turn into revolution? These protests, which began over rising prices, have spread right across Iran. This footage is from the city of Mashhad in Iran's northeast. We don't know exactly when it was filmed, but it is recent. And this was the capital, Tehran, last night. Huge crowds took to the streets, braving the bitter cold and threats of state violence. The death toll is rising. In just a single hospital, BBC Persian verified 70 bodies on one night. The morgue was at full capacity. Listen to the sound and how they're hitting people, this man says. They're massacring people. They run for their lives as security forces open fire. There are reports of power cuts in the capital. We know for sure that the internet and phones have been blocked. But people want their voices heard.
People are hopeful now because this time everyone is united by concern for their livelihoods, their income, and their future. This is why they have come out together with one voice to bring this to an outcome.
This is the man the protesters want to see removed from power. Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, has called the protesters vandals. Here, a building burns in the city of Yazd, but it's not random. This site was linked to a state foundation, widely accused of corruption. Iran's Prosecutor General announced that any protesters could be charged as enemies of God and face the death penalty. But as the regime's response hardens, they will know the threats they face are not only internal.
We will get involved. We'll be hitting them very hard where it hurts.
President Trump has repeatedly threatened military strikes if protesters are killed, and last night posted on social media that Iran is looking at freedom, perhaps like never before. The USA stands ready to help. These protests present a threat to the regime unlike anything seen in years. Much of the youthful population of this country seem to have decided they have had enough. But the government here was formed in revolution. If it ends the same way, it could come at a heavy price. Joe Inwood, BBC News.
Retired Army General David Petraeus, who was also the former CIA director and who led Allied forces in Iraq during the 2007 surge, before later commanding US forces in Afghanistan, told us what the US can do without getting boots on the ground in Iran.
Well, there are numerous options. You can all the way from diplomatic and informational, even just getting Starlink dishes in on the ground would help them communicate with each other and with the outside world. There can be economic sanctions of various types against individuals, against Iran's ability to export oil. There's humanitarian options. And then, of course, there are many military options. And I was also the former commander of U.S. Central Command, which is the Greater Middle East. That would be the regional combatant command that undoubtedly has been developing the menus of options for the president and others to consider. There can certainly be strikes on the headquarters of the security force organizations that are violently putting down these protests, these demonstrations that have been killing the people in very substantial numbers. And he could go after the missile capability that they have, which of course was heavily damaged during the Israeli strikes against Iran, and which concluded with a U.S. substantial bombing as well. They've been trying to reconstitute those missile arsenals. That would be useful. It could prevent some of the retaliation that might be of a concern. Again, a number of different activities that wouldn't require boots on the ground, that many of which could even be done with unmanned systems, cruise missiles, and the like.
David Petraeus. Well, Bahman Kalbasi is from BBC Persian and gave us this update on the latest from inside Iran.
Despite this digital blackout, we have images and we have eyewitnesses, both in the medical staff community and protesters across the cities that these protests have been going on. And the picture it gives us is one of extreme horror, bodies piling up in centers outside in the outskirts of Tehran and other cities, in the hospitals, and the numbers are growing and the hospital staff are overwhelmed. The fact that the communication has been cut to this in the severe manner that has happened in the last 60 hours almost, it means even doctors can't reach other doctors to ask for them to show up at the hospital because the needs is so severe. So the numbers, obviously we don't have an exact, but hundreds have been killed or injured, brought into these hospitals, and most of them with live ammunition. There's images of families trying to identify the bodies of their loved ones. There are reports that the government doesn't even allow them to bury them. It's a horrific scene on one side. The other is one of a jaw-dropping bravery, because despite the digital blackout and despite these mass shootings and killings of protesters, there are still ongoing protests that have been happening as late as a few hours ago in Tehran and other cities, which indicate that these protesters, knowing the risk that it carries, which clearly includes their lives, are still coming out, and the government has yet to manage to crack down fully and end these protests.
Are the protesters hoping that President Trump will get involved?
It is hard to gauge everybody's opinion, and Iran is not a monolith, and people have very different opinions about what should happen. Obviously, there is wide agreement and a larger scale protest is a sign of it that they want this regime gone. And how it should be gone, obviously, they've taken the matter to their own hands and risking their lives by coming out. But there are obviously many who would welcome some sort of a foreign assistance, being in a form of Starlink, giving people more easy access to the internet, all the way to targeting leadership with military intervention. Not everybody agrees that these are productive, especially when it comes to military intervention. Many worry that it will lead to the regime hardening its position even more and possibly hit targets in the Middle East, and this turning into some sort of a massive war, which will then distract from what the protesters want. And some think there is no other way. Without the foreign help, how could they overcome an extremely brutal crackdown by a regime that is armed to the teeth? So the reality of these protests is they know what they don't want, but how do we get to that place varies depending on who you speak to.
Bahman, I know it's difficult, but you have covered other protests that have taken in Iran. What do you think will happen next?
It is really the million-dollar question, but it is different from the other protests that I've covered and I've lived through. It is large scale, it's historic, it is across the country, it's across demographics, and it has faced perhaps the most brutal, the most bloody crackdown in the last 72 hours, and it hasn't died down yet. So that should tell us that we are in for possibly a different outcome than the previous protests. But does it mean that we'll see a smooth transition to a regime change? Certainly that's something that nobody would bet on at this point.
Bahman Kalbasi from BBC Persian. Well, Dr. Sahar Rezavi is the director of the Iranian and Middle Eastern Studies Center at California State University. She gave me her assessment of what's going on inside Iran.
Just as Bahman Kalbasi has shared, this started as a relatively, just as all protests in Iran began, it began with a spark that turned into large-scale demands for a complete transformation of the system. The last time there was an internet blackout of this scale during a protest was during Bloody Aban in 2019. And by the time the internet turned back on, estimates range from the very low end, 200 something, to the more likely end at around 1,500, according to a Reuters report, had been killed by the government. So when we see internet blackouts, we become very concerned, even in spite of the fact that there are images and reports coming out from Iran, from on the ground. My assessment is that this is, it may have begun as a slightly smaller scale protest than the Woman Life Freedom movement in 2022, but it has quickly ballooned out to bring in more and more sectors of society, including labor unions, students, people in rural and urban areas, sectors of society that have typically not been as engaged in protests. The economic crisis was the spark this time, but it is always sparked by something, and then it balloons out to a bigger scale protest.
You're in the US. President Trump has said that the US stands ready to help. What do you think he will do?
President Trump tends to prefer quick wins and easy optics. So my sense is that he is more hesitant to get involved directly on the ground if he thinks that there will be challenges and it won't be an easy victory. At this point, it's entirely possible when the United States and Israel together initiated the 12-day war over the summer. Many of us were surprised because a lot of bluster usually doesn't turn into actual armed attacks, but this time it did. And I think this, right now, it may, but at this point, I'm reserving judgment to see what's going to happen next from President Trump.
We know the reports say hundreds of people have died already. What options are open for the government there and the supreme leader if they do want to continue cracking down on these protests?
This is the big question, because what's different now for the government compared to the last round of protests, or last large-scale protests in 2022, is that their regional support structure has completely changed. In the past, they've been relatively freer to crack down so brutally as they always have, because they felt buttressed by their regional alliances, including Bashar al-Assad in Syria, Hamas and Hezbollah. These are even Russia, which is bogged down in now Ukraine. Its alliances have been significantly weakened, which makes it more difficult for them to engage in large-scale crackdowns without the looming threat of foreign intervention. The options, if they continue the crackdown, which is their standard operating procedure every time there is an uprising, then there is a risk that they are giving the United States and Israel and the US's regional allies the opportunity and the opening to intervene militarily. If they do not crack down, if they make concessions, if they make conciliatory gestures, which there have been one or two of, the risk to them is that the protesters see it as a sign that they should keep pushing.
This just popped up. So that was a BBC News report. Hopefully we got informed today about, what's happening out there and what's being said, through the media outlets, and, the lack of information was keeping us informed. But this just popped up here. It says Trump U.S. steps up planning for possible action in Iran. Trump aides are set to brief the president Tuesday on measures including military action and economic to follow through. It appears what's going to happen here is that Hegseth and Marco Rubio and all them, they're going to meet on Tuesday on the matter. So that will be interesting to follow for sure, to see what happens there. Let me point this back out over here, get this up here. We'll turn the volume down and move myself to the right, kind of just show you some of the footages that are out there in Iran. But yeah, this is going to be interesting. there's pretty much nothing else left to report on this matter. I was looking around trying to, try to give everyone every type of angle and perspective. Definitely things are happening here, and it will be interesting. But if that report is true, it means that he's not going to do nothing to at least through Tuesday. So I think he's going to probably just wait for things to, see what the people do in Iran and see if the people. But we'll follow this. We'll stay with this story for sure. Wow. And if the regime collapses before our eyes, and we get some sort of footage or some sort of protest or something else that's popping up that's crazy, or riots or anything like that, we will definitely come back on the channel. So we'll see what happens here. I'm informing you of what's going on. I'm going to blow myself up here. Thank you, everyone, for stopping by. We got our eyes on Iran, and we'll see where this goes for sure. Be safe out there. Tips@JLR Investigates. Tips@JLR Investigates. If you have any information that you want to share or set the record straight or say it in the chat, all opinions are welcome here on this matter. Crazy stuff. Is the regime done, or do you think that they will squash the protests? I mean, this seems like the protesters are backed by the Trump administration, so doesn't look good for the Iranian regime. It just does not look good. All right, we'll talk soon. Thanks for watching, folks. So I got our eyes on something else, so should be back on very, very soon with a new story. Stay safe out there. Have a great Sunday.